This episode is supported in part by Sacred Wright's Public Scholarship on Religion, Gender, and Sexuality through a grant from the E. Rhodes and Leona B. Carpenter Foundation. You can find Sacred Wrights online at sacred-rights.org and the Carpenter Foundation at carpenterfoundation.us. Welcome to Classical Ideas. This is Greg Soden. On this episode, I am delighted to welcome Azna Parveen. Azna Parveen is a PhD scholar in architecture at the University of Manchester in the UK. Her research explores the socio-cultural translations of Islam in the built environment through the perspective of oceanic trade along the Indian Ocean littorals, focusing on the Malabar Coast of Kerala, India. Trained in architecture with a specialization in urban design, she has previously worked as an architect and an academic. Beyond academia, she is a published illustrator and storyteller and leads heritage walks to encourage inclusive and interdisciplinary conversations about architectural and urban histories and sustainable futures for heritage. On this episode, we talk about her academic journey and a piece of her work called Reading Mappila Muslim Matrilineal Houses, Islam, Architecture, and the Indian Ocean. Please enjoy my conversation with Azna Parveen. Azna Parveen, welcome to Classical Ideas.
Hello, thank you so much.
I'm delighted that you're here, Azna. I'm wondering if we can start this off by having you introduce yourself a little bit to the audience, however you see fit, so they know a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Sure. I'm Azna. I come from Kerala in India, and I'm an architect and an urban designer, currently pursuing a PhD in architecture at the University of Manchester. And basically what I study is Mappila Muslim matrilineal ancestral homes to understand, and I basically do that to understand, the socio-cultural translations of Islam from the perspective of oceanic trade. So I guess that's a bit about myself.
Wonderful. How have you found the process of moving from India to the UK for your studies? Is it going fairly smoothly? I've moved around the world a little bit as well, and I know that that can be kind of a crazy experience.
It's been an interesting experience, obviously, but I think my background, I grew up in Saudi. I did my schooling in Saudi. So I've already done this sort of a move from one place to another and having to rebuild my, sort of like connections and people around and make memories again, from a clean state at one point of time. But I think that was a different sort of, it did equip me with certain skills, but I think this experience has been really, really different because there, obviously, I was shifting back to my hometown where I had cultural and, sort of I had family and things like that. So there were obviously, things that were different. But moving here has been it's been 1 year since I've moved here, and this is my first time in the UK. It's been a revolution in a way. I mean, in a different kind of a way about, uh, sort of from everyday things to, how things are done or what the systems are. So it's a very different education system here. And yeah, so it's been a really interesting journey, I guess. And I'm sort of like, yeah, I guess the process has been okay
Mm-hmm.
till now, yeah.
Excellent. Great. Well, I'd love to know a little bit about your academic and intellectual path. I know that you're interested in architecture. I would love to know your path into that, how you got into your interest in architecture and religion. Tell me about your journey up until this PhD program that helped you find your way.
That's actually a good question because now that I think about it, it's not been a very, straightforward path. It's been filled with a lot of like trial and error. It's been filled with a lot of like uncertainty and going against the norms and things like that. I guess I am a trained architect. I am trained to be like a practicing architect, and I have practiced architecture as well. So I like I said, I did my schooling from Saudi and I shifted back to Kerala to do my undergraduate studies in architecture. And the undergraduate studies in architecture is 5 years long in India. And it's a very, in India, the context is, it's a very practice focused training. It's a very practice focused profession in itself. So research per se or academics per se has not I remember I realized halfway through that degree that I did have an inclination towards academics. I did like research or whatever the form of research I was familiar with at that point of time when I was like 18 or 19. uh, I remember, being very excited about reading about theories and applying it and making sense of so many things. Uh, Apart from, doing it the way that a design process would enable us to do, or the way all of these theories or, things could supplement this design process that we were training, every semester in. So I guess there was also this, my friends kept on telling me about this knack of teaching that I had. So I would help them sort of like prepare for exams. And they did tell me like, oh, you have a knack for it. So these things were, academics and this idea of research were very peripheral. Even though I knew I had a thing for it, it was not a time or a context that I didn't know what to do with that sort of an interest in research. I didn't have much opportunities to engage with it. I didn't have a lot of people who were engaged in research and architecture around me. So basically, I didn't know what I could do with this, right? I didn't know how to explore that sort of an interest in it. So it was actually this idea of teaching that took me forward in terms of this journey. Uh, in architecture, also towards the final year, we have the subject called urban design, and I remember, two of my faculties who like really like got me very interested on it, like Surekha and Vinod, and they like got me really interested into it, and that I ended up doing a thesis that was, to an urban scale, moving away from a building scale to an urban scale. And that interest in urban design actually led me to then pursue a master's in urban design, which is again a sort of a practice based professional sort of a degree, a specialization in architecture. But I remember urban design being, which is urban design degree master's is 2 years again, and I had the fortune of doing it from School of Planning and Architecture in New Delhi, which is one of the premier institute for architecture studies in India. My urban design education is what I consider to be sort of like a very fundamental aspect. I believe it has contributed significantly to the way I understand things, I see and look at things, because there's this, when you study cities and when you study to understand them and to design for these spaces within the city, uh, there's this concept of understanding them from the whole to part, and the part to whole. So there is this idea of, we were trained to look at things from a very complex, very layered, nuanced way of, because we have to accept that this particular space in the city is so and so, or the behavior of people within that space and so, because of so many other elements that are contributing to this, right? So
Hmm.
there's been an interconnected, very nuanced, layered sort of an understanding of things that I guess uh, has informed my approaches and my lens a lot. And I guess my urban design journey in SPA was also where I felt like my research interests were validated for, because we had courses and it opened up many worlds, that I was not aware of, that I could, engage with. And so it was a very fulfilling experience, even though it was like a very intense 2 years and we had a COVID happening in between and all of that. So I guess after my urban design training, I sort of like after 7 years into education, uh, I sort of dabbled with different roles, testing out different skills that I had picked up, that I've built on in within that 7 years, right? So I practiced as an architect for some time. I worked as a visual designer, visual communications specialist, or I did a part as an illustrator for some time. I also converted, my undergraduate thesis into sort of urban heritage walks. So I would host heritage walks. I dabbled in storytelling and, storyboarding. And I also ended up teaching for a short period of time in an architecture school, the National Institute of Technology in Calicut, where I taught history and urban design. And it was actually when I was, yeah, sorry, it was actually when I was teaching there that I sort of like felt like, okay, this is what I wanted to sort of do further on. And I started thinking about a PhD much more strongly. So because it is architecture and it was a very professional, practice oriented sort of a field, it took a long time for me to sort of even decide on wanting to do a PhD. So I guess that's one part of the journey. In terms of how I got interested into religion and res- how I got interested in religion is basically like I remember building networks out of my architecture college, uh, because I wanted to be involved in many more things. And uh, I sort of ended up, or I sort of, all of these networks or these events, I would go for events, I would volunteer for them, I would, build friendships and things and all. And all of these people who were involved in these kind of things mostly had degrees in social sciences. So they were mostly students of social sciences and humanities. And I think I learned a lot about research and what about PhD and all from them, from conversations that I've had with them, from observing what they were doing, the kind of topics that they were engaging in, the kind of that they were taking part in. So I guess that kind of a social network also sort of pushed me um, to recognize this sort of this interest that I have had for so long uh, within architecture, like the understanding, the human side of architecture, the social side of architecture, and also exploring, architectural history.
That all sounds great. What an amazing backstory. Thank you for, sharing the comprehensive path that you've traveled through teaching and finding your way in architecture. That's really cool. I'd really like to talk about a piece of writing that you sent over called Reading Mappila Muslim Matrilineal Houses, Islam, Architecture, and the Indian Ocean. Can you tell me a little bit about the origin of this project and this piece that you sent over?
So my PhD topic, which is based on, my PhD is based on my PhD is based on Mappila Muslim matrilineal houses. And the origin of it, I would say, is like it actually comes from a project that I ended up doing in my master's for my master's thesis, where I looked at this town called Ponani, which had a very sort of historic past. It was part of trading networks, and even though it just like other towns in Kerala, it had multiple religious, cultural institutions and communities, and its spatial, built forms. But because I was working in a part of Panani that had a lot of these buildings and a landscape, an Islamic sort of cultural landscape, I sort of was researching into the historical parts of it. I wanted to know more about this place that I was supposed to design for. So I was doing a 6-month long thesis about this place, and during my thesis, I realized that there is a very significant gap of knowledge about architectural knowledge about these towns, even though they were very important um, to the larger historical trajectory of India as a country. I realized that, Indian Ocean trade, these coastlines of Malabar, as well as, the eastern coastline of Coromandel, they were literally like they were like really marginal within these architectural historiographies of India, which led me to sort of explore more about understanding uh, you know, uh, how architectural historiography in India has been organized. What is this concept of Islamic architecture? Where does it begin? And I realized that my sort of initial um, guess about it being marginal was actually true. And I also realized that a lot of this knowledge building, which was done by the colonial forces, were focused on a very political, land-based, and imperial sort of an Orientalist sort of framework. They were based on such kind of narratives, which and they were very one-sided in a way. And I found that they were very monument centric. So what I ended up then doing is then thinking about what are the different ways that I could sort of question this idea of Islamic architecture, or what we understand as Islamic architecture, question how architectural histories or spatial identities are being formed, and what is the role of the ocean, particularly. Narratives from within these spaces. How can that enrich the ongoing discourses in architecture and the humanities or social sciences? How can these built typologies add on to these discussions about things? So that's how I ended up, sort of focusing on this region. I realized that this could be a good way to sort of look and explore Indian Ocean trade, Islam that has come in through commerce, and how that has sort of like engaged within these contexts and manifested into the built environment. So that's basically been about the project.
Excellent. Okay, so tell me a little bit more about the matrilineal houses. Like, what makes these old family homes so special to you that you spend time researching and writing about this topic?
So matrilineal basically means, where the inheritance happens. In a very basic terms, it means when the inheritance happens through, the women's side, or through the mothers. And what is interesting about these houses are, of course, that fact that the inheritance happens through the mothers, that it is handed over from the mother to the daughter, and so on. And matrilineal, in a way, the matrilineal Muslims are a small part of the Mappila Muslim community in Kerala today. But even then, their matrilineal is very, if you look at it, it is very fundamental. It was very fundamental to the workings of Indian Ocean trade. So I guess in a lot of ways, matrilineal houses, these ancestral houses that currently, are being sort of demolished or being rebuilt on, and it's facing a lot of like different sort of trajectories, future trajectories. So they are constantly disappearing from the larger urban environment, and but these are very significant part. It's a very significant layer of the history, which can tell us more about how the Muslim community has, sort of how the Muslim community has sort of which can tell us a lot about how Islam has sort of negotiated within these local cultures and contexts, and in what way does architecture tell us about these kind of engagements and cultural, accommodations. So I guess it gives us a very uh, nuanced understanding of how religion, how oceanic trade, and how sort of even monsoons in a way, uh, which is what contributed to this entire phenomenon, also impacts or comes about and unveils in architecture. So I guess why I have been interested in them is I've always had this idea that, domestic spaces speak a lot about so many things. It talks about beyond, obviously, it talks about the individuals who reside in it. It talks about the families. It talks about, how the family negotiates within the neighborhood. There are so many different perspectives that I believe domestic spaces in itself can give you. And this is something that, I have had really like personal sort of connection to, because as I said, I grew up in Saudi, and growing up in a place where you are an expatriate and you don't actually, it's actually not your home, right? You are one day you are staying in rented spaces. So even though you form an attachment to the space that you grew up in, the homes that you grew up in, uh, I think the idea, the notion of home and all what it means and what contributes to being a home and making a home, and the different perspectives from different people who come about, visit or live in those spaces. I guess it's a very like it's a huge um, source of perspectives or different ideas for me. So I guess I've always been interested in this idea of domestic spaces unveiling social networks, human behaviors, or even cultural sort of traditions and histories and aspirations.
Excellent. So I'd love to know a little bit about a term. There was a term in the writing that you sent me, and I'm not exactly sure if I'm going to say it properly, but is it Theravad or Taravad? What is this word?
So Tharavad basically is a Malayalam term for ancestral homes. So these are actually houses where you would see generations of the family living within them. So if I give you a very general example of the house, it would be this big house which would be built by this family, and this house would consist of living quarters, like smaller apartment like quarters, where you would have a bedroom, you would have a toilet, and you would have a small courtyard with a well, and you would also have other rooms. So, and this unit, which is called an ara, is then repeated multiple times according to the number of daughters that are there within the family. So what happens is when a daughter is married, they are given this ara for her family. So, which is where she and her husband and her kids would reside. So, then what she would do is she would pass down that ara to her daughter, when she gets married, when her daughter gets married. So the house then becomes this big sort of like uh, a system wherein sometimes you even see generations of family living in. Sometimes it becomes like uh, an ecosystem within itself, right? And there are different ways that these families then, sort of, it might not even be sisters, right? At this point of time, it could be like they've passed it on to multiple generations. That there are people even who, they are like many generations apart. So how they all live within this very space, and how this space actually tells us a lot about what their aspirations are, and how this entire system of this aras and this coming about of a spatial layout based on this inheritance through mothers tells us a lot about the history of the place, how the community sort of lived in this space and negotiated within these contexts.
Wonderful. I'd love to know a little bit about monsoon Islam as well, because that was really prevalent in the article and I found it pretty compelling.
So Monsoon Islam is actually this academic term or definition, sort of term that is being proposed by Professor Sebastian Prange in his book, when he defines it as an Islam that comes in through trade, and that is spearheaded by ordinary traders. So most of the time, what what essentially forms this discussions of in relation to Islam is most of the time based on political empires of Islam. It might be based on the kings and the conquests and the many political forms that it has taken. While a significant number of you know Islam has also transmitted, or it has been transmitted to different modes. One of the significant mode has been trade, because the Arabs were involved in Indian Ocean trade and the trading circuits, uh, like centuries back. So Islam has transmitted sort of through trade as well. And the way that happens is in a very significantly different way from what, would happen when a conquest happens, right? So the kind of propagation, the kind of transmission is very different, fundamentally because the modes are different. And much of the history, or much of the perspectives and narratives about Islam and its for example, cultural forms, has been primarily based on these imperial narratives, in these political narratives, while the role that ordinary traders, the role that these geographies, these commercial geographies of Islam, like South India, like Indonesia, like Southeast Asia, a lot of Southeast Asian geographies, they all add different perspectives to these discourses, but they remain very marginal to the dominant construction of Islamic cultures.
Wonderful. What is the future of this particular project that you sent me?
So right now I'm pursuing my PhD on it, and I hope to sort of I'm in my second year of it, and I hope to sort of complete it very well. And then I guess it has a lot of potentials in the ways where I've been thinking, also because I come from an urban design background, about how the future of these built typologies, right? These houses, how are they changing? How are they what are the kind of forms that they are taking when the aspirations of people change, when when they have different needs, and they have things that might not work within these houses anymore. So I guess there are different potentials to expanding these projects, which is something that I'm also thinking through.
Wonderful. So you recently did a training cohort through the wonderful Sacred Rights program, and I was curious just how that experience was for you. What did you enjoy about it? And what did you take away from it?
So the Sacred Rights program was it was a very fulfilling and enriching program for me, because um, even though I've done public facing work in different formats before, be it through design, or be it through these heritage walks, or illustrations that are designed for audiences in the public, I was because now I'm in an academic sphere where I'm constantly learning and relearning and reflecting on so many things. Uh, I was wondering about, what are the different other forms, and what are about knowing more about the implications and the potentials of public scholarship. And I guess with my background, it has been also fundamental to me that uh, that my research, I would want it to be accessible. I would want it to be, readable, uh, and understandable to the different communities that I am still a part of, right? Be it the architecture fraternity, be it the students, or be it the general public, the community that I'm studying, or even general spaces in itself. So I got into it wanting to learn more about, what more I could learn about public scholarship in a much more definitive manner. And I guess my major takeaways has been it has sort of like broadened my understanding of public scholarship. It is informed me much more about like there's this like three things that talk about like the risks, the rewards, and responsibilities that one needs to be aware of when you're engaging in public scholarship. And also in terms of hearing from my fellow cohort members, their experiences, the kind of work that they do, uh, and the kind of energy that they bring into that space, right? Like it's been like it's been a very enriching sort of a thing to be a part of and to contribute to.
Wonderful. What are some of your career aspirations when you finish up with the PhD? What are you hoping to go into?
So I hope I'll be finishing my PhD in 3 years' time, like in by 2028. So I still have my initial aspirations of teaching, but I have also found out that I really, really like research. So I'm open to, exploring postdoctoral opportunities with regards to where I'll be able to build more about these aspects. And also, if I also the teaching opportunities where I'll be able to talk more about um, architecture and understanding, multiple phenomena through architecture. I recently also taught a class which I was TAing in about the idea of looking at monsoon Asia and interconnected histories. So expanding on the discussions on also discussing with students about decolonial ways to understand the context that we come from, right? The general, like South Asia or Southeast Asia, or the Middle East. So all of these areas where we have had a colonial knowledge building process. What are the ways in which that we understand and think differently?
Wonderful. Well, where can people find you if they want to follow along with some of the work that you do in the future?
So I guess LinkedIn would be a good way to sort of like follow up on the work that I do, because I do post about reflections and the things that I've been part of there, and share. I have conversations with people who would want to talk further. So I guess LinkedIn would be a good place to begin with.
Wonderful. Well, Asna, thank you so much for joining me to chat about your work, reading Mappila Muslim matrilineal houses, Islam architecture in the Indian Ocean, and chatting about some of your career goals and some of your experiences with sacred rites. I've had a really good time chatting with you today. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much. It's been a really good experience for me as well. This has been good to think through a lot of things.